So thank you. Thank you, Startup Spotlight. Thank you, George. Thanks to the judges. And I hope that you enjoy these speeches. We'll close the first day of How to Web conference, at least here on the startup stage, with a talk that will teach us some very important lessons for every startup. We'll learn more about networking, about influencing, about getting the right connections, about getting the meetings. And I'm very proud and honored to invite on stage Colette Ballou. Colette, please take the stage and tell us more.
Andy, if you ask me to take it off next time I'm on stage, I'm going to kill you, all right? I think we're also running about, about 40 minutes late on the other stage. And my goal is to make sure that you guys can go and listen to Carlos from Seed Camp also. So that's what we're going to do here, people, all right? So we're going to whip through this, give you some meaningful content. I'll stay a little afterwards, but I want everyone to go see Carlos because what he has to say is so important in helping you guys make your dreams come true. So with no further ado, if we can... Yes, except we missed the first one. There we go. So I'm Colette, and I am an entrepreneur. I started my own company. I'm also an angel investor. So, and some of the companies that we've worked with, and maybe some of the reasons I might know what I'm talking about, are up here. These are some of the clients that my company's worked with. So Ballou PR is a firm with offices in Paris, London, and Berlin. I live in Berlin. That's where we've opened our most recent office. And I've opened up every single one of those offices. I think it's been important to be a part of those ecosystems, just as I think it's important to be a part of this one, which is why I am present. So we have done really super things. We've helped Facebook enter into France. That's been a blast. We helped a company named MusiWave sell itself for over 100 million euros. And I mean, we've just had fantastic experiences. I'm probably the only executive I know of in Europe who's worked with Tim Armstrong of AOL, Jan Koum of WhatsApp, Mark Zuckerberg and Sheryl Sandberg from Facebook, Ben from Pinterest. We have had some really great, fantastic experiences. And so a lot of what I'm about to tell you is culled from conversations I've had with a lot of these people. And who are some of these people? Well, that's my butt, but that's Jan Koum. I can tell which one you guys are looking at. There's Mark. That was in Paris a couple years ago now. That's the guy in the dark jacket is Fred Wilson from Union Square Ventures. So, and these jokers, right? I mean, you know, Mike Butcher, Robin Waters, and some weird-looking guy who I think is a pedophile. Oh wait, no, that's David. That's David McClure of 500 Startups. Don't tell him I said that. Okay. And so what I'm going to tell you comes just from listening to all of us talking about how little time we have, how much we want to do good and help you guys. But really, we want to help, but how can I make it so that you know how to make yourselves most likely to be heard? That's really the whole point of this, right? So I'm going to ask you to think about using this along with journalists. Maybe you want a story. You want to approach investors. You know, all these folks that you want attention from, how can you make it so you're most likely to get what you need? So the first rule is that this is not an all-you-can-eat buffet. The point is not to rock on up, you know, and start asking people for favors, right? Rule number one is to remember and respect that every single time you're asking for a favor, you're stealing away from time that probably one of these people they want to use to do something else. Spend time with their kids, work out, sleep. So that makes the super, super biggest rule, respecting their time. How do you respect their time? You don't waste it. Okay? So let's go step back and talk just a little bit about networking, because in a lot of my conversations with people and my observations, people have forgotten what it means, or maybe they just were never told. And networking is not about getting other people to do stuff for you, basta. It's also not about power and influence, what you can, you know, it's not about that at all. One thing that I noticed that bad networkers fail to grasp is that it's a two-way street. Everybody who's successful at networking realizes this, right? And especially in our little world. Our ecosystem is so precious. It's probably the only industry, and I will call it an industry, where there's just this abundance of goodwill. There's a willingness to talk, to share, to make connections, to do favors for one another. But every single time a person gets in and is a bad networker, they start eating away at that goodwill, right? And sometimes they don't even mean to eat away at that goodwill. They just do it. So I'm going to teach you how to be a good networker and also to spot the badasses. And I don't mean badass in a good way. I mean the people who are just sucking out of the ecosystem because they do get marginalized. We talk about them, right? We all share our stories about the people who have sucked the system dry, who are not giving back. So these are the biggest tips for networking. And don't worry about capturing all this. This will be available for you. I'll tweet it out. You'll have a slide share. You'll have all of this content for yourself. Focus on what you need to get out of me. You can ask me questions, etc. But these are really the basic rules. And frankly, again, we've talked about respect already, but have a specific ask. Keep it as short as possible. Be direct and honest. A long time ago, somebody once approached me and said, maybe we might want to talk about working with Ballou PR. Could we have a lunch together? And they didn't want to talk about that at all, right? They wanted to talk about what kind of free stuff they could get out of me. And that's cool. Just tell me up front what I'm in for. Like, I'm willing to talk to you, but don't kind of do a bait and switch. Don't reel me in with something and then have it be something else. Just be upfront with me so I can answer and help you. Maybe I can do pro bono work. Maybe I can't. And again, the rule of making it as little work as possible for the person you're asking something of is so important. You are so likely to get what you need if you can give them a small, specific thing. And of course, always try to give something back. So again, let's think about the kind of people who you'll be asking things of, right? Journalists, founders, investors, whatever, and these rules work across all of these scenarios. So let's talk about real super specifics, right? So first is how to network online. Well, you'll notice that the rules are the same, the same points, right? Except the beauty of networking online is that you can do your homework. You can look at people, what their LinkedIn profile. You can be looking what they care about on Twitter. People are great. They give so many hints as to what they care about. So take a look. It's really easy to get a feel for what a good way to approach them. Maybe it's an investor and they've just made an investment in some SaaS, and you also have a product not completely the same, but you have something in the same line that you think would interest them. Well, then use that information, right? What about networking in person? Right? So networking in person, and I think that the toughest thing, there are different kinds of situations. There's the situations where you're going to go meet a person, you set a meeting, or you're in an event and they're going to speak, right? So you can do a little research ahead of time, right? But then there's the tougher ones when you don't know, you're going to go to an event and you have no idea who's going to be there. Well, Twitter hashtags are a really good way of figuring out who's there. Just take a quick look at how to web. And you'll see, everybody, the people who are talking about it, it just tells you who's here pretty much, or who's watching, but you can see the people who are saying, hey, why don't you meet me here at the cocktails? I just did that. So you can figure out that I'm actually present here, even if I wasn't speaking to you right now. There also, the event list is sometimes public, but sometimes you don't know who the hell's going to be there, right? You just don't know. So then you go back to my point, having a goal clearly in mind. Why are you here? And you probably have a couple reasons why you're here, right? You might be looking for employees for your own startup. Maybe you're looking for investment in your startup. Maybe you're hoping to meet some journalists and get them to write about your startup. Boom, boom, boom. You have reasons, right? So keep those in mind. And that's what when you meet people, keep it in mind. Now, I'm not saying be relentless and don't be human and only talk about your company and what the other person can get from you, but keep it in mind, especially if you're trying to talk to somebody important who might have limited amount of time. Right? It helps you, it helps them, and everybody can get done what they have to get done. In fact, don't be afraid to say, hey, do you mind if I cut to the chase? I want to tell you about my startup. You really don't need to be asking me endlessly about my day if you really know you want something specifically from me. So be like, do you mind if I just talk to you honestly? I'd love to know more about this. Try it. So again, networking in person, they're your same rules, right? And again, be brief, be direct. But I know a lot of people get really scared, right? And part of that is trying to get to know your target. But let's say you're in this worst case scenario where you couldn't possibly do any research because you had no idea who you were going to meet, or you met somebody who you weren't planning to meet. Well, how do you do that? Well, one of the best ways to do it is to have something nice to say, right? And or if you can't say something nice, try to say something intelligent or smart. Compliment, but don't sound too suck-uppy. And also be careful about challenging people, especially Americans. Americans are not excited. In Europe, we're kind of like, hey, what you just talked about was bollocks. That made no sense. And we have no problem with that back and forth. Americans can sometimes get really sensitive. I know, because I am one. I ceased to be really sensitive. I stopped that in about 2004. But there are ways to start things out on the wrong foot. And if challenging can sometimes take you there. So don't even do it. And again, at the end, just tell people that you enjoyed meeting them, take the card, give yours. It's really simple. Now, here's a perfect example. You know who I want to meet? I want to meet, is it John Berard from Mozilla? We have friends in common, and I haven't met him yet. I saw him, I watched him speak, he was great, but I haven't met him yet. So I came to this, I want to meet him. I have a couple things I want to tell him, like say, we have some friends in common. I know a little dirt on some of his colleagues. So, John, if you're hearing me, but really, I know what I want to say. But I was lucky. I knew he was going to be here. I had time to prepare, didn't I? Okay. So, let's talk about some epic fails. These have happened to me. Genders have possibly maybe been changed to protect the guilty. However, there was an attaché at the embassy, the U.S. Embassy in Paris, who was just the worst networker of all time, right? Basically met me and thought that good networking was to turn around and offer my services free of charge to everybody they met. People who needed PR but were in the luxury hotel business, which I know nothing about, right? And just always CC, always bringing me into an email trail saying, oh, you know what? Colette would be happy to help you. Stuff to do, right? Up to and including taking care of my colleagues, my clients, and running my business. It was maddening. This is the bad networker. So, yeah, we're not especially close. And let's say he was a partner at a very well-known top 3 venture capital firm based in London. And let's say that in front of his whole partnership, he emailed me with his partnership in CC and basically told one of his partners that I would be delighted to take that partner's 19-year-old daughter out. Just offered up my time, offered up my weekend. Not only was I planning to go away that weekend, so jeopardize that, but just hijacked my time. Not cool, right? And there was no way I could get out of it without really embarrassing him because he CC'd all his partners. So I did it, but you bet that I gave him an earful afterwards. Don't do this. I mean, it's just incredible disrespect for time. Both of these are scenarios. Now, neither of these people, well, I don't know if the first one's doing anymore, but the second one is not doing it anymore. So none of you will be victimized like this by this particular person going forward. So how do you not ask for things? Don't like to be negative, but I see this a lot, so I've decided to call it out. Don't ask to pick my brain. Don't ask just to meet for coffee. Remember, have a specific ask. If you want to talk to me about venture capital, put it in the email, because maybe I'll say, you know what, I can't meet you for coffee because that's a half an hour for me to get to the coffee place, an hour with you, and I had a half an hour back. But I have no problem getting on the phone call with you for 20 minutes. Give me the option. Always give people the option to say no. That's so important. One of my favorite closers for any email when I ask for something is, thank you for even considering this request. Believe me, it gets me more because I acknowledge that they don't have to do it, because I acknowledge that I'm asking for something. You usually get an incredibly positive response. Here's one of my favorites, when people just drop their business plan at me and say, can you tell me which VCs I should be talking to? No, it's not my freaking job. It's not my job. It's your job. You do your job. What am I, your mother? And then my other favorite is, here's the list of VCs I'd like you to introduce me to. Really? Is that what I am? Really? Does it say VC matchmaker? Is that how I make my money? Is that how I pay payroll of my colleagues? No, that's not how I do it, right? And I'll even show you a really, really bad email to that effect. Oh, my other favorite. Can you introduce me to media contacts who might be interested in my business? Sure, it's not like I don't do that for a living. Happily. And in the meantime, I'm going to do that. I'm going to let go of my entire Paris staff just so I can make sure that I can do what you asked me to. Use your heads, people. And again, there's that bad networker. Don't be that bad networker who just offers up other people's time. I know the instinct there is that you think you're doing good, but what you'd want to do is, if you really want me to step into a conversation, you email me on the side and say, would you mind? Could I suggest this? Give me a chance to say yes or no. Don't just bring me into the trail. So this is one of my favorites. So here is the worst, one of the worst I've ever seen, right? So this just shows, and you read through it, but this just shows a complete unwillingness to do the homework or to put any effort into it. If you are a founder or a CEO, you don't just drop your problem on somebody else's shoulders. You don't just say, this is who, this really, and this is an email that came from somebody to this guy, Samir, and they hadn't talked in 5 years. And they met like maybe twice. And all of a sudden he dumps this on this guy. And there's no way that any of us who have these contacts would forward this guy on. He's already showing that he's a jerk. He doesn't do homework. And why would any of us send that on to the contacts that we care about and saddle our friends with this? None of us would. So here is that same email, but rewritten in a way that's going to win, right? Notice that second paragraph, how thoughtful it is, right? He's done his homework, right? They've invested in businesses somewhat similar to mine. And having read extensively, showing that he did his homework about their approach, I believe the size of our raise and our current traction align with their investment thesis. Really done the homework here, right? And this is so much more likely to get a positive response. Of course I'll help, right? And again, all this will be, you'll have access to it. I'll make sure you do, but and you see the spirit of it. Instead of just going dump, it shows a thoughtfulness. It shows a caring that actually this is taking time. This person has taken time to really look at the companies in question. So having talked about all that, some really, really good resources. So this is a fantastic way to ask for resources or introductions effectively. I also really recommend that you follow Roy. He's just full of great tips and tricks if you're not already following him. And basically the rule that Roy states and that I believe in as well is that I will introduce you to somebody I know if I really feel that's going to be of interest to both parties. And I have to send it through a filter. And then very specifically investor introductions, because I know they're really important to most of you guys. And Hunter Walk is another person. If you're not following him, he's really he's a thoughtful VC, and he's insightful, and he always has good advice. And he'll also show you how VCs think or other investors think, and so it's really useful for you all. So then finally and last, this is an example of a really easily forwardable intro. Now, I talked to you about making it easy for the other person. I can't sit down and write about your company, right? You need to write about it, because what I'm going to do is forward it on to the person in question. That way it takes me a couple keystrokes, maybe a little bit of, I met this guy, I met this woman, I think their business is really interesting, I happen to know a lot about it because of A, B, C. I might take 3 minutes, but then you get what you want because you have written this email. You've done the work. You sent it to me. You've gotten my sign off. I said, yes, I'll do it. And then I'm going to forward it on. I will not, of course, forward it on with you in CC, because I'm not going to do that to the contact in question. I'm going to give them a chance to opt in or out. But again, if I think it's going to work, if I think there's a really good reason, and I often find a really good reason, and you've made it easy for me, 3 minutes, 4 minutes tops, I'm probably going to do it. And so with little things like this, what I want you to gather from this is that most of this is actually in your hands. You can put yourself in this great position where when you start asking for things, you're going to get it. You just need to do your homework. You need to show respect for people's time. but it's mostly in your control. Instead of it feeling like don't know how I'll ever get in touch with this investor, that angel, this journalist. No, in many cases, it's in your hands. So I want to give you the power to get what you guys need, and that's what this was all about. So I promised to be quick, and I promised to make sure you had time to go see Carlos. I'm happy to answer questions, but I'm also, if you want to come and talk to me afterwards, I'd be happy to do that too. So thank you, guys. It's absolutely fair to come and talk to me afterwards too. That's not a problem.
Okay.
Follow me on Twitter or just take a quick look at my Twitter account because I'm going to get those slides up to you shortly, okay? Great.
Thank you. Thank you, Colette. Thank you very much. So we'll go and see Carlos now. Thank you for your patience. We will see you tomorrow here on Startup Stage with other inspiring talks and panel discussions. See you tomorrow. Thank you.